双语音标领航，注音阅读启蒙，叶兴阳有声读物。
America Through the Spectacles of an Oriental Diplomat by Wu Tingfang, LL.D., late Chinese minister to the United States of America, Spain, Peru, Mexico, and Cuba, recently Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Justice for the Provincial Government of the Republic of China, etc. Preface. Of all nations in the world, America is the most interesting to the Chinese. A handful of people left England to explore this country. Gradually their number increased. And, in course of time, emigrants from other lands swelled the population. They were governed by officials from the home of the first settlers. But when it appeared to them that they were being treated unjustly, they rebelled and declared war against their rulers, the strongest nation on the face of the earth. After 7 years of strenuous, perilous, and bloody warfare, during which thousands of lives were sacrificed on both sides, the younger race shook off the yoke of the older, and England was compelled to recognize the independence of the American states. Since then, in the comparatively short space of 130 years, those revolutionists and their descendants have not only made the Commonwealth the richest in the world, but have founded a nation whose word now carries weight with all the other great powers. The territory at first occupied was not larger than 1 or 2 provinces of China, but by purchase, and in other ways, the Commonwealth has gradually grown till now it extends from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean, from the north where ice is perpetual to the south where the sun is as hot as in equatorial Singapore. This young republic has already produced many men and women who are distinguished in the fields of literature, science, art, and invention. Their hosts of men, who in their youth were as poor as church mice, have, by dint of perseverance and business capacity, become multimillionaires. There you may see the richest man in the world living a simple and abstemious life, without pomp and ostentation, daily walking in the streets unattended even by a servant. Many of them have so much money that they do not know what to do with it. Many foreign counts, dukes, and even princes have been captured by their wealthy and handsome daughters, some of whom have borne sons who have become high officers of state in foreign lands. There you find rich people who devote their time and wealth to charitable works, sometimes endowing libraries, not only in their own land, but all over the world. There you will find lynching tolerated, or impossible of prevention. There one man may kill another, and by the wonderful process of law escape the extreme penalty of death. There you meet the people who are most favorably disposed toward the maintenance of peace, and who hold conferences and conventions with that object in view almost every year. There an American multimillionaire devotes a great proportion of his time to the propaganda of peace, and at his own expense has built in a foreign country a palatial building to be used as a tribunal of peace. Asterisk. Yet these people have waged war on behalf of other nationalities who they thought were being unjustly treated, and when victorious they have not held on to the fruits of their victory without paying a reasonable price. There the inhabitants are, as a rule, extremely patriotic, and in a recent foreign war many gave up their businesses and professions and volunteered for service in the army. One of her richest sons enlisted and equipped a whole regiment at his own expense, and took command of it. In that country all the citizens are heirs apparent to the throne, called the White House. A man may become the chief ruler for a few years, but after leaving the White House he reverts to private citizenship. If he is a lawyer he may practice and appear before a judge, whom he appointed while he was president. There a woman may become a lawyer and plead a case before a court of justice on behalf of a male client. Their freedom of speech and criticism are allowed to the extreme limit, and people are liable to be annoyed by slanders and libels without much chance of obtaining satisfaction. There you will see women wearing "Merry Widow" hats who are not widows but spinsters, or married women whose husbands are very much alive, and the hats in many cases are as large as 3 feet in diameter. There you may travel by rail most comfortably on palace cars, And at night you may sleep on Pullman cars, to find in the morning that a young lady has been sleeping in the berth above your bed. The people are most ingenious in that they can float a company and water the stock without using a drop of fluid. There are bears and bulls in the stock exchange, but you do not see these animals fight, although they roar and yell loudly enough. It is certainly a most extraordinary country. The people are wonderful and are most interesting and instructive to the Chinese. Asterisk, this magnificent building at The Hague, which is aptly called the Palace of Peace, was formally opened on the 28th of August, 1913, in the presence of Queen Wilhelmina, Mr. Carnegie, the founder, and a large assembly of foreign representatives. I refer to the Spanish-American War. Have captured the Philippine Islands. The United States paid $20 million, gold, for it to the Spanish government. Asterisk. This was several years ago. Fashions change every year. The present type is equally ludicrous. Such a race should certainly be very interesting to study. During my 2 missions to America, where I resided nearly 8 years, repeated requests were made that I should write my observations and impressions of America. I did not feel justified in doing so for several reasons. First, I could not find time for such a task amidst my official duties. Secondly, although I had been traveling through many sections of the country, and had come in contact officially and socially with many classes of people, still there might be some features of the country and some traits of the people which had escaped my attention. And thirdly, though I had seen much in America to arouse my admiration, I felt that here and there was room for improvement, and to be compelled to criticize people who had been generous, courteous, and kind was something I did not wish to do. In answer to my scruples, I was told that I was not expected to write about America in a partial or unfair manner, but to state impressions of the land just as I had found it. A lady friend, for whose opinion I have the highest respect, said in effect, "We want you to write about our country and to speak of our people in an impartial and candid way. We do not want you to bestow praise where it is undeserved. And when you find anything deserving of criticism or condemnation, you should not hesitate to mention it, for we like our faults to be pointed out that we may reform." I admit the soundness of my friend's argument. It shows the broad-mindedness and magnanimity of the American people. In writing the following pages, I have uniformly followed the principles laid down by my American lady friend. I have not scrupled to frankly and freely express my views, but I hope not in any carping spirit, and I trust American readers will forgive me if they find some opinions they cannot endorse. I assure them they were not formed hastily or unkindly. Indeed, I should not be a sincere friend were I to picture their country as a perfect paradise, or were I to gloss over what seemed to me to be their defects. Contents. Preface, Chapter 1. The Importance of Names, Chapter 2. American Prosperity, Chapter 3. American Government, Chapter 4. America and China, Chapter 5. American Education, Chapter 6. American Business Methods, Chapter 7. American Freedom and Equality, Chapter 8. American Manners, Chapter 9. American Women, Chapter 10. American Costumes, Chapter 11. American versus Chinese Civilization, Chapter 12. American versus Chinese Civilization, Continued, Chapter 13. Dinners, banquets, etc. Chapter 14. Theaters, Chapter 15. Opera and musical entertainments, Chapter 16. Conjuring and circuses, Chapter 17. Sports. America through the spectacles of an Oriental diplomat. Chapter 1. The importance of names. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Notwithstanding these lines, I maintain that the selection of names is important. They should always be carefully chosen. They are apt to influence friendships or to excite prejudices according to their significance. We Chinese are very particular in this matter. When a son is born, the father or the grandfather chooses a name for the infant boy, which, according to his horoscope, is likely to ensure him success. Or a name is selected which indicates the wish of the family for the newborn child. Hence such names as happiness, prosperity, longevity, success, and others, with like propitious import, are common in China. With regard to girls, their names are generally selected from flowers, fruits, or trees. Particular care is taken not to use a name which has a bad meaning. In Washington, I once met a man in an elevator whose name was Coffin. Was I to be blamed for wondering if the elevator would be my coffin? On another occasion, I met a man whose name was Death. And as soon as I heard his name, I felt inclined to run away. For I did not wish to die. I am not superstitious. I have frequently taken dinner with 13 persons at the table, and I do not hesitate to start on a journey on a Friday. I often do things which would not be done by superstitious persons in China. But to meet a man calling himself Coffin or Death was too much for me. And with all my disbelief in superstition, I could not help showing some repugnance to those who bore such names. Equally important, if not more so, is the selection of a name for a state or a nation. When the several states of America became independent, they called themselves the United States of America, a very happy idea. The Union was originally composed of 13 states, covering about 300,000 square miles. It is now composed of 48 states and 3 territories, which in area amount to 3,571,492 square miles. Practically as large in extent as China, the oldest nation in the world. It should be noted that the name is most comprehensive. It might comprise the entire continent of North and South America. It is safe to say that the founders of the nation did not choose such a name without consideration, and doubtless the designation United States of America conceals a deep motive. I once asked a gentleman who said he was an American whether he had come from South or North America, or whether he was a Mexican, a Peruvian, or a native of any of the countries in Central America. He replied with emphasis that he was an American citizen of the United States. I said it might be the United States of Mexico, or Argentina, or other United States, but he answered that when he called himself a citizen, it could not mean any other than that of the United States of America. I have asked many other Americans similar questions, and they all have given me replies in the same way. We Chinese call our nation the Middle Kingdom. It was supposed to be in the center of the earth. I give credit to the founders of the United States for a better knowledge of geography than that possessed by my countrymen of ancient times, and do not assume that the newly formed nation was supposed to comprise the whole continent of North and South America. Yet the name chosen is so comprehensive as to lead one naturally to suspect that it was intended to include the entire continent. However, from my observation of their national conduct, I believe their purpose was just and humane. It was to set a noble example to the sister nations in the Western Hemisphere, and to knit more closely all the nations on that continent through the bonds of mutual justice, goodwill, and friendship. The American nation is, indeed, itself a pleasing and unique example of the principle of democracy. Its government is ideal, with a liberal constitution, which in effect declares that all men are created equal, and that the government is of the people, for the people, and by the people. Anyone with ordinary intelligence and with open eyes, who should visit any city, town, or village in America, could not but be impressed with the orderly and unostentatious way in which it is governed by the local authorities, or help being struck by the plain and democratic character of the people. Even in the elementary schools, democracy is taught and practiced. I remember visiting a public school for children in Philadelphia, which I shall never forget. There were about 300 or 400 children, boys and girls, between 7 and 14 years of age. They elected one of their students as mayor, another as judge, another as police commissioner. And in fact, they elected for the control of their school community almost all the officials who usually govern a city. There were a few Chinese children among the students, and one of them was pointed out to me as the police superintendent. This not only eloquently spoke of his popularity, but showed goodwill and harmony among the several hundred children, and the entire absence of race feeling. The principals and teachers told me that they had no difficulty whatever with the students. If one of them did anything wrong, which was not often, he would be taken by the student policeman before the judge, who would try the case and decide it on its merits, and punish or discharge his fellow student as justice demanded. I was assured by the school authorities that this system of self-government worked admirably. It not only relieved the teachers of the burden of constantly looking after the several hundred pupils, but each of them felt a moral responsibility to behave well, for the sake of preserving the peace and good name of the school. Thus early imbued with the idea of self-government, and entrusted with the responsibilities of its administration, these children, when grown up, take a deep interest in federal and municipal affairs, and, when elected for office, invariably perform their duties efficiently and with credit to themselves. It cannot be disputed that the United States, with its democratic system of government, has exercised a great influence over the states and nations in Central and South America. The following data showing the different nations of America, with the dates at which they turned their respective governments from monarchies into republics, all subsequent to the independence of the United States, are very significant. Mexico became a republic in 1823, Honduras in 1839, Salvador in 1839, Nicaragua in 1821, Costa Rica in 1821, Panama in 1903, Colombia in 1819, Venezuela in 1830, Ecuador in 1810, Brazil in 1889, Peru in 1821, Bolivia in 1825, Paraguay in 1811, Chile in 1810, Argentina in 1824, and Uruguay in 1828. These republics have been closely modeled upon the republican form of government of the United States. Thus, nearly all the nations or states on the continent of America have become republics. Canada still belongs to Great Britain. The fair and generous policy pursued by the imperial government of Great Britain accounts for the Canadian satisfaction with their political position, and for the fact that they do not wish a change. It must be noted, however, that a section of the American people would like to see Canada incorporated with the United States. I remember that at a public meeting held in Washington, at which Sir Wilfrid Laurier, then Premier of Canada, was present, an eminent judge of the Federal Supreme Court jocularly expressed a wish that Canada should be annexed to the United States. Later, Mr. Champ Clark, a leader of the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives, addressed the House urging the annexation of Canada. Even if these statements are not taken seriously, they at least show the feelings of some people, and he would be a bold man who would prophesy the political status of Canada in the future. There is, however, no present indication of any change being desired by the Canadians, and it may be safely presumed that the existing conditions will continue for many years to come. This is not to be wondered at, for Canada, though nominally a British colony, practically enjoys almost all the privileges of an independent state. She possesses a constitution similar to that of the United Kingdom, with a parliament of two houses, called the Senate and the House of Commons. The sovereign of Great Britain appoints only the Governor-General, who acts in his name, but the Dominion is governed by a responsible ministry, and all domestic affairs are managed by local officials, without interference from the home government. Canadians enjoy as many rights as the inhabitants of England, with the additional advantage that they do not have to bear the burden of maintaining an army and navy. Some years ago, if I remember rightly, in consequence of some agitation or discussion for independence, the late Lord Derby, then Secretary of State for the Colonies, stated that if the Canadians really wished for independence, the home government would not oppose, but that they should consider if they would gain anything by the change, seeing that they already had self-government, enjoyed all the benefits of a free people, and that the only right the home government reserved was the appointment of the Governor-General, although it assumed the responsibility of protecting every inch of their territory from encroachment. Since this sensible advice from the Colonial Secretary, I have heard nothing more of the agitation for independence. From a commercial point of view, and for the welfare of the people, There is not much to choose today between a limited monarchy and a republic. Let us, for instance, compare England with the United States. The people of England are as free and independent as the people of the United States, and those subjects, they enjoy as much freedom as Americans. There are, however, some advantages in favor of a republic. Americans until recently paid their president a salary of only $50,000 a year. It is now $75,000 with an additional allowance of $25,000 for traveling expenses. This is small indeed compared with the civil list of the king or emperor of any great nation. There are more chances in a republic for ambitious men to distinguish themselves. For instance, a citizen can become a president and practically assume the functions of a king or an emperor. In fact, the President of the United States appoints his own cabinet officials, ambassadors, ministers, etc. It is generally stated that every new president has the privilege of making more than 10,000 appointments. With regard to the administration and executive functions, he has in practice more power than is usually exercised by a king or an emperor of a constitutional monarchy. On the other hand, in some matters, the executive of a republic cannot do what a king or an emperor can do. For example, a president cannot declare war against a foreign nation without first obtaining the consent of Congress. In a monarchical government, the king or the cabinet officials assume enormous responsibilities. Lord Beaconsfield, then Mr. Disraeli, while he was Prime Minister of England, purchased in 1875 from the Khedive of Egypt 176,602 Suez Canal shares for the sum of £3,976,582 on his own responsibility, and without consulting the Imperial Parliament. When Parliament or Congress has to be consulted about everything, great national opportunities to do some profitable business must undoubtedly be sometimes lost. No such bold national investment as that made by Lord Beaconsfield could have been undertaken by any American president on his own responsibility. Mr. Cleveland, when President of the United States, said that the public affairs of the United States are transacted in a glass house. Washington, in his farewell address, advised his compatriots that on account of the detached and distant situation of their country they should, in extending their commercial relations with foreign nations, have as little political connection with them as possible. And he asked this pertinent and pregnant question: why, by interweaving our destiny with that of any part of Europe, entangle our peace and prosperity in the toils of European ambition, rivalship, interest, humor, or caprice? In 1823, 27 years after Washington's celebrated address, President Monroe in his annual message to Congress warned the European powers not to plant any new colonies on any portion of the American hemisphere, as any attempt on their part to extend their system in that part of the world would be considered as dangerous to the peace and safety of the United States. This Monroe Doctrine, as it has since been called, practically protects every state and country on the American continent from attack or interference by any foreign power, and it cannot be denied that it has been and is now the chief factor in preserving the integrity of all the countries on that continent. Thus, the United States is assuming the role of guardian over the other American nations. In the city of Washington, there is an International Bureau of the American Republics, in which all the republics of Central and South America are represented. It is housed in a magnificent palace made possible by the beneficence of Mr. Andrew Carnegie, the American multimillionaire and philanthropist, and the contributions of the different governments. It costs $750,000 gold dollars, and Mr. John Barrett, the capable and popular director of the Bureau, has well called it a temple of friendship and commerce and a meeting place for the American republics. The Bureau is supported by the joint contributions of the 21 American republics, and its affairs are controlled by a governing board composed of their diplomatic representatives in Washington, with the American Secretary of State as chairman ex officio. This institution no doubt strengthens the position of the United States and is calculated to draw the American republics into closer friendship. Chapter 2. American Prosperity. One of the main causes of the prosperity of the great American Republic is its natural resources. It possesses coal, oil, silver, gold, copper, and all the other mineral ores. Nature seems, indeed, to have provided almost everything that man needs. The soil is rich. Wheat and every kind of fruit can be grown, but favorable as are these native conditions, they could not be turned to any great advantage without the skill and industry of enterprising men. Many countries in Africa and Asia possess equal advantages, but they are not equally prosperous. This leads me to the consideration of another reason for America's growth. The men who have migrated to the United States have not been rich people. They went there to make a living. They were prepared to work. Their purpose was to improve their condition, and they were willing to undertake any manual or mental labor to accomplish their object. They were hardy and strong and could bear a heavy strain. Their children inherited their good qualities. And so an American is generally more hard-working and enterprising than most of the people in Europe and elsewhere. Another reason for America's success is the great freedom which each citizen enjoys. Every man considers himself the equal of every other, and a young man who is ambitious will not rest until he reaches the top of his profession or trade. Thousands of Americans who were once very poor have become millionaires or multimillionaires. Many of them had no college education. They taught themselves, and some of them have become both literary and scholarly. A college or university education does not necessarily make a man learned. It only gives him the opportunity to learn. It is said that some college men have proven themselves to be quite ignorant, or rather that they do not know so much as those who have been self-taught. I do not in any way wish to disparage a college education. No doubt men who have been trained in a university start in life with better prospects and with a greater chance of success. But those men who have not had such advantages have doubtless done much to make their country great and prosperous, and they ought to be recognized as great men. The general desire of the American people to travel abroad is one of their good traits. People who never leave their homes cannot know much. A person may become well-informed by reading, but his practical knowledge cannot be compared with that of a person who has traveled. We Chinese are great sinners in this regard. A Chinese maxim says, "It is dangerous to ride on horseback or to go on a voyage." Hence, until very recently we had a horror of going abroad. A person who remains all his life in his own town is generally narrow-minded, self-opinioned, and selfish. The American people are free from these faults. It is not only the rich and the well-to-do who visit foreign countries, but tradesmen and workmen, when they have saved a little money, also often cross the Atlantic. Some years ago, a senator in Washington told me that he crossed the Atlantic Ocean every summer and spent several months in Europe, and that the next trip would be his 28th voyage. I found, however, that he had never gone beyond Europe. I ventured to suggest that he should extend his next annual journey a little farther and visit Japan, China, and other places in the Far East which I felt sure he would find both interesting and instructive.